Throughout the Tudor period, there are a huge number of executions which were carried out in public. During the reign of King Henry VIII, a large number of religious dissidents and heretics were executed, and Mary I continued this, burning people at the stake who did not believe in her Catholic beliefs. Many people were made martyrs after they were executed in brutal and barbaric ways, and some were made saints. One of those figures who suffered during the Tudor period in the English Reformation was Anne Lyne. She was a victim of Queen Elizabeth I's religious settlement and her plans to bring together Catholicism and Protestantism under her church. Her religious settlement was aimed to have been a bridge between the two religions, but often many people suffered because of these laws. Anne Lyne stood up for what she believed in, and because of this she was sentenced to death and was executed in shocking scenes. Join us today as we look at her story and execution, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Anne Lyne was born as Alice Hyam and was the eldest daughter of William Hyam, who was a prominent Puritan. William, her father, was the son of an MP, who was also a Protestant reformer, who served in the church during the reign of the brutal King Henry VIII. Alice's grandfather was also involved in selling many monastic properties, lands and estates during the dissolutions of the monasteries. But around the early 1580s, Anne, or Alice, was converted to Catholicism, although her family was strongly Protestant. This caused problems with some members of her family, but she was converted alongside her brother William, and also her future husband Roger Lyne. Both Roger and William were disowned and disinherited by their families, and Alice lost her dowry payment. Alice then seemingly changed her name to Anne around this time, and started answering to this, and she wanted to start a new life as Anne Lyne. But things for her were not great, as her brother and husband were then arrested and imprisoned for attending Catholic Mass, which was considered a crime. The pair were held for a significant amount of time and were then fined. Anne's brother was released but then placed under very close watch by priest hunters and other anti-Catholic watchers, and her husband Roger was then banished from England, and he was forced to go and live in Flanders. Roger stayed here in Flanders, and he did suffer a bout of ill health whilst in exile. But Anne was supported by Roger, as he sent her money regularly and made sure she was safe and well fed, and that she had some money for her life. Some of this money shockingly was paid for by the King of Spain. Then in 1594, Roger died, and Anne was left a widow. But Father John Gerard, a Jesuit priest who later escaped out of the Tower of London, around this time opened up a house and a safe haven to keep Catholic priests and prominent Catholics away from the authorities. This was very dangerous, as a religious settlement issued by Elizabeth I banned any behaviour such as hiding priests and allowing any Catholic underground worship. When Elizabeth I became Queen in 1558, people in England were heavily divided by religion, and her sister Bloody Mary I had restored Catholicism as England's official religion. But many Protestants were persecuted, and along with a growing number of Puritans, Elizabeth I needed to try and solve the problem of religion. She tried to do this with the settlement, but the Catholics were not happy with her new laws, as under Mary I they had religious freedom, but under her half-sister Elizabeth I they would not. Many were encouraged to change their beliefs or deny their faith, and worship in hiding. The settlement caused outrage and forced many Catholics out of the country, and many went to live in Europe or Catholic countries for their own safety. Some did change, but a number also began to plot to overthrow and kill Elizabeth I, to oust her off the throne and replace her with Mary Queen of Scots, who was seen as a legitimate Catholic heir to the English throne. If someone refused to attend the new Church of England services, then they were classed as a recusant, and under Elizabeth's laws they were forced to pay a fine of £1 a week for their non-attending on Sundays or holy days. This fine was later raised to around about £20 a month, which could have been thousands today. Those who were found to have persuaded or coerced someone to convert to Catholicism were deemed guilty of treason and could also be executed. Because of this, Elizabeth's reign was dangerous for Catholics, and worship went underground and occurred in quiet and discreet places, as Catholic Mass was banned. The ones who were spearheading underground Catholic worship were treading a very dangerous line, and hiding Catholic priests was so dangerous that many people were sentenced to death and were executed. One of these women who did this was Margaret Clitheroe, who was executed by crushing for her sheltering of priests. Anne Lyne, the newly widowed Catholic woman, was placed in charge of John Gerard's priest house and hideout. This made her liable to execution, and despite being ill herself, she managed to run the house and home successfully for 3 years. She even kept things moving whilst John Gerard was imprisoned at the Tower of London and kept under brutal conditions, being tortured using the manacles. Following his escape, he documented that, after my escape from prison, Anne Lyne gave up managing the house. By then she was known to so many people that it was unsafe for me to frequent any house she occupied. Instead, she hired apartments in other buildings and continued to shelter priests there. One day she allowed in an unusually large number of Catholics to hear Mass. Some neighbours noticed the crowd, and the constables were at the house at once. What Anne Lyne had done is to open up the house to a large mass worship of Catholic Mass, and with this it was rather foolish, and she attracted a huge amount of unwanted attention. The guards were called as this was banned by the religious settlement, and as things heated up, Anne managed to shelter the priests, and most people escaped the house, but Anne Lyne and another lady, Margaret Gage, was arrested by the authorities. Francis Page, a priest, managed to use a hiding spot and evade capture, and Margaret Gage was later pardoned for her involvement. But Anne Lyne would not receive any kindness from the monarchy, and instead was placed on trial. She was imprisoned at the horrific Newgate prison, where there was a huge overcrowding problem, and also disease inside of the prison. But she was then tried at the Sessions House on Old Bailey Lane on the 26th of February 1601, and during her trial she was clearly ill. She had been made weak by jail fever, but she tried to defend herself. She said that although she had hid one priest at first and had been caught, she regrets she could not have housed thousands more. The judge then found her guilty, and with this, they sentenced her to death for assisting and hiding a banned priest. There was no wait for Anne Lyne's execution. On the 27th of February, a day following her trial, she was taken to Tyburn, where over the years thousands of people were executed on the infamous triangular gallows. She was executed before 2 priests, Roger Philcock and Mark Barkworth, who were found guilty of treason and were to be hanged, drawn and quartered. As a woman, Anne was spared this brutal ordeal and was just hanged instead. While she was at the scaffold, she repeated what she said at her trial, proclaiming, "I am sentenced to die for harbouring a Catholic priest, and so far am I for repenting for having so done, that I wish with all my soul that where I had entertained one, I could have entertained 1,000. Anne Lyne was handed over to the executioner, who placed her on a stool or a ladder, before he placed the noose around her neck. After this was secured, he removed the stool or ladder, and with this Anne was left hanging and gasping for breath, and within seconds was killed on the Tyburn Gallows. Following her execution, Anne was beatified by the Pope, and was then canonised, and she became known as St. Anne Lyne, sharing a feast day with fellow saint and Tudor martyr, Margaret Clitheroe. She was just one of many victims who died because of Elizabeth I's religious settlement and rules on religion, and there were hundreds of other people who were executed for hiding priests and concealing Catholic worship. It was a very dangerous time if you believed in different beliefs to what the monarchy had. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.